Hello, everyone, and welcome to the iSpring Solutions webinar series, where every week we talk about e-learning trends, share iSpring tips and tricks, and cover clients' cases. My name is Paulina. I am the community manager at iSpring, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar, where we will be talking about new age learning strategies. And our presenter is Tarun Johnson from ComLab India. Hi, Tarun. How are you doing? Thanks for tuning in.
Pretty good, Paulina. Thank you. And how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation to be our guest presenter. So, Tarun already did a session, I think this year in January, and
Yes.
he was talking about e-learning trends for 2019, and you
Mhm.
guys just loved him as a presenter, so I reached out to Tarun and asked to be our guest speaker just one more time. So I hope that everybody enjoys this session. And before we move on to actual webinar, I'm going to cover a couple of technical details. So first of all, guys, this session is being recorded, so no worries. You will receive a link to a replay sometime after the webinar. However, I would like to encourage you to stay till the very end because it's an amazing opportunity to address your questions directly to our presenter. And to do so, please submit them in the question box, which you will find on the right side of the GoToWebinar panel. And right now on the screen, you should see how it looks. Okay, so I'm done with my intro, and Tarun, I am passing the mic over to you.
Paulina, thank you so much for that introduction. And hello again, everybody. My name is Tarun, and I represent ComLab India. So today's session is going to be on the whole new mind. Now, this was inspired by Daniel Pink's book called The Whole New Mind, or Why Right Brainers Will Rule the Future. Now, we've all heard what right brain and left brain means. So left brain is more the logic and those kind of things, whereas the right brain is more for the creativity and artistic part. So that is what we're going to try and reconcile today through this webinar. And we look at it from the perspective of e-learning practitioners, okay? So we've taken the lessons that Daniel Pink tried to teach us through his book, and we've sort of mapped them to us in our industry as e-learning practitioners. And I'm sure you'll find it really useful. So let's get started. So a little bit about me. So as Paulina shared, I'm the Director of Customer Experience. I'm based out of Canada, and currently I do handle our clients in US and Canada mostly, and I do travel a lot to meet our clients and to basically get every project started and ensure that each project reaches a successful conclusion. And about ComLab, we are basically in the e-learning industry for the past 20 years or so, so we come with that kind of experience. And we do a lot of services across the e-learning spectrum, such as converting ILT to classroom training to e-learning. We do a lot of legacy course conversions to HTML5. We do a lot of translations for all our global customers, and then a lot of audio recording as well. So we're basically a full service design and development firm. And today, I think some of that experience we're going to share with you through this webinar. We have a lot of samples for you, so please keep your eye on the slides and look at those samples when I'm speaking to different parts of how Daniel Pink's concepts tie into e-learning. We have a video here. I'm going to request Paulina to please play this video. And this is something we put together just to illustrate the logic and the emotion divide that usually we see and how we try to reconcile both of that through our new perspective today. So it's going to be pretty good. It should set the stage for the rest of our webinar today.
A Whole New Mind, Why Right-Brainers Will Rule the Future by Daniel Pink. Our brains are divided into two hemispheres. The left is all about logic and analysis and helps us get high SAT scores. The right is all about design and emotion and helps us get art. Over the past century, we have been focusing much more on left than right brain thinking, as we had to make sense of an explosion of information, convert it into knowledge, and put that knowledge to work. Engineers, computer programmers, and other knowledge workers led the evolution. But success led to abundance and automation, making it less important how products are made, and more important, how they are sold. Right-brainers can give meaning to products through design, empathy, and storytelling. Right-brain thinking took the back seat during the information age, but in the conceptual age, right-brain thinking will become increasingly important. Those that understand what Pink calls the 6 aptitudes of this type of thinking and harness their power are going to thrive in the emerging world. The right brain will be at least as important as the left brain, giving rise to a whole new mind.
So this introduction video actually spoke about the whole new mind and how that relates to what we're going to see. And a whole new mind is nothing but a collection of 6 concepts that Daniel Pink touched on. So the 6 concepts are design, story, symphony, empathy, play, and meaning. Now, by using all of these concepts, we will be able to craft new narratives or produce new concepts. We can actually make artists of ourselves when we're creating e-learning. And then we can also teach learners how to detect patterns in their learning, because basically that's how we've been used to learning in the past. So we are trying to mix both left brain and right brain thinking to create a whole new mind. All right. So these are some products from IKEA. I'm sure all of us are familiar with IKEA. And when you look at these products in this manner, they don't really seem, so exciting or so attractive, right? They're just something you might see on Amazon, for example, and you're not sure whether you want to buy them because you're not sure how that's going to look when you get it home. But what IKEA does is they give you the whole experience. So every single piece of furniture that they have in their store, they're going to put it in a place, in a way that shows you what it would look like when you take it home. So basically, IKEA does this a lot. They take these products, they put them into actual, I would say, scenarios or places that give you a whole experience, as opposed to something that you can just look at a product logically and say, okay, it's 10 feet wide, it's 5 feet tall, maybe it'll look good, as opposed to looking at it in the whole gamut of the experience. So that's what IKEA does. And that is a complete solution that we as e-learning practitioners, as training managers, as instructional designers need to create for our learners. We're looking at a paradigm shift in learning. So instead of looking at just ROI of training, completion rates, things like that that are more linear and quantitative, we also want to see what is the quality of the training, what is the level of empathy that we're putting in our courses in terms of how our learners can relate to those courses or relate to that training. So that is going to be the discussion for today. So let's jump into 6 of those factors. Now, as I go through these factors, I would encourage you to please follow through with me as I go through the concept. I will also share a few sample screenshots. All right, so design. Now, when it comes to e-learning courses, there are 5 aspects of design that we have identified that helps your learners relate to that course more. So those 5 are format, structure, roles, connection, and a relevant graphic user interface or GUI. So let's explore what all of those are. So format. So today we have, well, fortunately, because of technology, we have the opportunity to create learning in a variety of different formats. And it's always good not to get carried away just because we can do something that we should do it, but really look at how you can leverage technology to give the most relevant format to that person at that point in time. So it's not always good to bring them in the classroom, but it's not always good to give everything in your micro learning. So I would say the best way to look at it is through an overall blended learning strategy that you can pick and choose different formats that work based on how difficult it is to teach something, how frequently something needs to be reminded. So different factors like that should decide which format your learning goes into. And when it comes to structure, now this is how you're going to lead your learners to different structures, different paths, basic, intermediate, and advanced. It's always good to structure learning in that sense because it's a little overwhelming when you introduce a learner to just an advanced course at the first thing that they see. It's always better to take them gradually. Well, this is what you didn't know. This training is going to take you through the basics. Once you're done with that, you go through your assessment. All right, now you're ready for the intermediate course and then the advanced course. So learners are able to progress. So they have a feeling like, okay, I'm actually making progress here. I'm actually learning something, and my learning is building on my previous learning. So that is how you need to structure your training. Try not to cram everything in one learning experience or two learning experiences, but try to space them out. Give your learners the freedom to learn and then learn again and then learn a third or fourth time. So that is how you would need to structure your training. The more relevant that you make your training to your learners' roles, the more open they would be to actually taking that training and completing that training. So for example, if you have somebody like a sales manager who needs to take a training, talk to that person in that role. So let them select the role that they have, that they are at the beginning of the training, and then the rest of the training can actually speak from that perspective. So when they're looking at the training, they're going to say, hey, yeah, I faced that situation. It's really nice of this course to let me know that, they understand what I went through, and this is how I would need to do it in the real world also after this training. And again, this is something that role-specific personalization aspect that we recommend for almost every training that we do, especially the ones that are high impact or high ROI. And this design number 4, connecting with the learner, it actually ties into role in a different way. So we have many customers around the world, right? So it's a little bit funny sometimes. What happens is courses that are created in the US, when they are sent to different learners globally, not everything makes that transition to their local, culture or, the way they speak. So in the US, we have a lot of idioms that we use, but again, people outside the US may not understand all of those things. So if you have a global learning audience, it's always good to keep the language that common. It should be understandable, ubiquitous, and the tone also should be relevant to the type of audience we're trying to train. By tone, I mean, in the US, again, we have a more friendly, informal tone in our training, as opposed to, I'm from India, so I grew up in a training environment where everything was more authoritative, like the teacher was the authority. They were like, okay, that's right. So we had to listen and understand. So always keep these things in mind. If you're training a diverse audience, there are different aspects that you would need to consider before you actually create your training. And finally, everybody loves to hear their name. I mean, I heard somewhere that a person's name is the sweetest thing to their ears, and I think that's true. I have an Indian name, so in the US, people usually don't pronounce my name correctly, but when somebody does, I feel really great. Wow, this person went through the trouble of trying to learn how my name is pronounced, and he did it correctly, so I'm really happy. So the same thing can be done in your e-learning courses too. So something as simple as allowing your learner to enter their name at the start, and then every alternate slide or so, you can just say, hey, Michael, or whatever that name is, this is what we think you should learn. This is how you should do this scenario. So the more you put their name, almost, I wouldn't say put it in every slide because that's just going to be too much, but maybe just sprinkle their names, personalize the training across different slides, across different courses. And that really is going to help them remember what they learned much better. All right, avatars are another way you can do that. You can also start to create content relevant graphic user interfaces. So the screen that you're seeing right now is for an onboarding course that we created. And the way we did it is we created a whole building with a bunch of different rooms, starting from reception, to an office room, to their colleagues. So the person could actually go to each room, meet that person, click on things on the wall and learn about the company and go, almost as if they were there in the actual office without being there. So this is a way that we sort of said, we know you're getting onboarded. It's a tough time for you. You have so many questions. Maybe you're nervous. So let's try and ease that experience for you. And this is something that can gel really well with a wide variety of learners. All right, so that was design. And now we are going to dive into number 2, which is called story.
Humans have been telling stories since we could speak, probably even before. We tell stories around the campfire. We write plays, we write novels, short stories, we make movies, we take photographs, tweet to each other, the list goes on. The power of story is that it has an ability to connect with people on an emotional level. One of the things you hear all the time, this advice, is write what you know. Now, as a kid, I was like, I don't want to write about suburban Minnesota. That's boring. I want to write about explosions and monsters and car chases. Well, what that actually means is, yeah, go ahead and write about monsters and explosions and car chases, but put something into it that talks about your own life, how you feel. Do you feel scared? Do you feel alone? Something from your own life will make that story come alive and not just be a boring car chase.
All credits to Pixar for that video. They are a wonderful company. They do a lot of amazing stuff just as far as the technical aspect is concerned. But at the end of the day, it really boils down to story, how well you are able to engage your learners on the emotional level or on the level of feeling. And again, as e-learning practitioners, this is something that we should not forget. The way we can imbibe, I would say, stories in our e-learning courses is probably in three ways. So we can do scenarios. We can actually do comic strips, for subject matter that would be good to be presented as a comic, or we can just do case studies for the more formal or business-oriented subject matter. And each of those has their own way to be done. So scenarios can be used, for example, in information security to test learning, to see how well they're applying those concepts. And then you can give them feedback at the end saying, this is how you should have done it. Comic strips, again, these are really cool. The disadvantage of this is it may take a little more time in designing a comic strip, but if it is really a high impact course, maybe you want to reach leadership of your company, and this should be something that sticks in their mind, this should be something that they're happy to take, then comic strips are a really good way and engaging way to do that. And obviously we have case studies as well. So again, case studies, dialogue, just to show you what can happen from a person-to-person perspective, and then how you should react in that scenario. So again, there's different ways to pull out your story. And again, if you just look at scenarios, comic strips, and case studies, I think you would have 90% of all your bases covered. So I would encourage you, if relevant, please use some of these concepts in your e-learning. It'll just make your learners engage much better with your training. All right, so that is first story. And now we're going to jump into Symphony. Symphony. I know we had a video for this as well, but I don't have it up here. And the video was the Mission Impossible theme being played by the, I think, San Francisco Philharmonic Orchestra. So it was really wonderful, I mean, to see all those people playing the cello, the violin, all those instruments in perfect harmony, and it was a wonderful symphony. Again, I'm not saying your e-learning courses should be, a musical masterpiece, but basically try to tie everything together. In training, we have a lot of disparate concepts floating around. We have a lot of things we can do, but the more you try to create a holistic experience, the better that will be for that learner. So the way we can do it in e-learning is through maybe a table of contents. We can do a topic overview. We can even do videos that cover the whole concept. Now, table of contents sounds a little boring, but actually it's not. I'm going to show you. So I would say this is a table of contents. Now, this is actually more of a mind map. A mind map is something that a person looks at, and it makes sense on a logical level. And even your table of contents can be created in this manner. You don't have to give it step by step in that old boring manner. You can actually create mind maps. You can create logos and icons, and then allow your learners to go and choose whichever one they want to take first, and then complete that, and then come out and take another one. So in this manner, they get a holistic view of what exactly is happening in that whole course. And they also get the freedom to explore as they want to and complete the courses in the order that they choose is most suitable for them. This is again an example of the same concept. This is a course we did for a pharma company, and each building was actually a different department that they could dive into and learn about, and then come out and then go to another building. And videos, again, this is a simple video of a CEO speaking for an important message at the start of the training. This is a little different because you don't actually see, okay, how does this connect? But the reason we put this here is because a CEO or somebody in leadership, when they actually say, this training is important to us, important to the company, because it will help you do this, this, and this, and that's what makes it valuable, it puts it in the learner's mind that this is something of value, this is something that really ties things together for the company, and that is why they would be more encouraged to do it. So again, we can use all of these concepts in our e-learning courses, or some of them, depending on how applicable you think it would be for that training. Number 4 is empathy. And there's a difference between sympathy and empathy, and I think this video will actually show that out. So Pauline, again, my final request for the third video, if you could just play it, please.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
I just love that video. I mean, every single time I watch it, it just reminds me of how I can be a more empathetic person. And not to rain on anybody's happy parade here, but this is something we need to keep in mind in training as well, because you're teaching people, right? You're trying to make people learn. You're not just teaching another computer how to do things. So there has to be that aspect of, I know where you're coming from. I know these are the difficulties you might be facing in your job, and this is how we think this training can help you address that. And we're not silver lining it, as that lady just said so eloquently, but we're just trying to say, we know how it is, and we know that this is the best thing for you to get out of that situation in a way. So again, distilling that into e-learning. So let's see what we have here. So we have simple things like keeping the navigation unrestricted. If you are still restricting navigation slide by slide, course by course, please get out of the 1950s. It's 2019, almost 2020. Let people learn how they want to learn. Let people learn at their own pace. If you really want to check their learning, make your assessment at the end really robust, and that's enough, right? So if somebody passes the assessment, that should be enough. You shouldn't really want to know whether they saw slides 1 to 100 and spent maybe a minute on each slide. That's irrelevant. Again, that's unrestricted navigation. You can have a lot of questions as icebreakers, just to let them know you understand, and these are the questions that they might face, and you understand that they have these questions. You can address their fears right out of the box. You can also give a lot of encouraging feedback instead of just saying, you're wrong, take the course again, you're too bad, I don't know why you're here, so don't do that. Unrestricted navigation. Again, this is a simple course that we created that had a number of modules, 11 modules, and a person could just go dive in any single place they wanted. So this was for an actual Salesforce for a company, for one of our clients. And maybe they knew something about modules 3, 4, and 5, but they didn't know about 7 and 8. They could just do those first, and they could just get those out of the way and then quickly breeze through the others. And they'll be really so open to doing this because it gives them the freedom to do it. Simple questions as icebreakers. You don't need to go really far with these. Just break the ice in a simple way. Just ask them what they know from their industry that's relevant to them, and just take it from there. You can also do a lot of addressing learners' fears. Again, this was for a company that was trying to change, was actually involved in change management of some sort for DevOps. So this was trying to integrate two different teams. And people from both teams had fears like, am I going to become redundant after this change? So we addressed those fears in the course and then took them as to how they should navigate that change. So things like that would work really well. Again, this is an example of a positive feedback that we're giving. We actually try to give a lot of feedback so that they could just go and understand what it is they were supposed to be answering there and why that is the right question. So the more feedback you give, the more helpful it is, the better, and the learning and the retention would be that much better as well. All right, so last two things, let's talk about play. So when it comes to play, we have two things that the e-learning community goes gaga about. So one of them is gamification, and the other is game-based learning. Now, please bear in mind, these are two different things. They're not the same thing. And I'll tell you what's the difference. So gamification is when you're using game-based mechanics, aesthetics, and game thinking to engage people, to engage your learners within the course. So it's not so much as you're putting them in a game, but you're using game elements in your course to train somebody better, to help them retain something better, to apply something that they've learned previously. So that is gamification. But game-based learning, you're actually integrating games into that course. Like, you're getting a person to play a game, and you'd hope at the end of that game that they come away with some of the learning we're trying to inculcate for them. So that is the difference between gamification and game-based learning. Now, both of these are pretty effective. You can use both of them, but obviously, as you can imagine, game-based learning just takes a little more, maybe a lot more in terms of design and development time to get done. So use that as a tool in your arsenal, not for every single training need, but for the things that are really high impact and relevant. All right, so finally, we come to meaning. Now, if you look at it, the 5 things that we spoke about so far, they also have the aspect of meaning embedded in them. And meaning is nothing but, for every adult learner, you really need to tell them why they should take this training. I mean, why this training is going to be important to them at some point down the line. Why and how is it going to help them? And we need to make that clear as e-learning designers and developers, training managers. We need to make that really clear that by the end of this training, this is how your job is going to be impacted. Because of that, this is how your performance is going to be better, and this is how the business is going to get impacted, just because you're going to do this training and get better at your job. So we can do this through 3 different ways when you look at an e-learning course. You can do it before the training itself through preparation. You can do it during the training through learning objectives. You can also do it after the training through something called as performance support. And let's look at each of these aspects. Now, before training, I guess we do have a lot of instructional designers in the audience, so you would relate with this. So before training, all we would need to do is look at our training needs assessments, our goals analysis, and keep in mind that when you're assessing goals, you would need to tie that back into the goals of the business. Otherwise, what are we really trying to achieve? The goal of training is not to train. The goal of training is to help your business do better down the line because of the performance improvement of your learners. So keep that in mind. And again, when you're training something, you really need to keep that performance in mind, the terminal objective, that performance that the person should be able to do as a result of the training. And that is something you need to keep in mind. That is something you need to express to these learners through something called your learning objectives. Now, learning objectives are something we've seen in almost every ID-based training. And the reason it keeps coming back again and again is it's really because it's that important. Because when you tell a person that you are going to be able to do something, by taking this course or by taking this training or by looking at this video, you're really driving it into their mind that there is a benefit to be had at the end of this. It's not just maybe a compliance course. It's not just you're checking off a box that they did the training. There is a tangible benefit. And the more clear that you make that benefit, the better it would be for that person, the more engaged they would be, the more enthusiastic they would be to complete that course. And this we've seen almost everywhere. It just makes sense. And finally, many people think training is just delivering a course and then leaving it at that and then hoping that people are going to remember down the line. That is really not how it works. Because the way the brain remembers things is the more it is forced to recall something, the more importance the brain assigns to that, and the more easy it is to recall time and time again. For example, if it's something we do every single day, it's just by practice that the brain thinks, okay, this is important. I need to be able to do it every single day. So this is why I'm going to prioritize that in my memory. So your memory is not infinite. There are things that take priority at different times. And the way you would push that priority up for a single learning event is by doing performance support. So you're trying to get to your learners at different points in time after the training. Maybe you're doing it in every 2 weeks, or maybe you're doing it on a bi-monthly basis. It just depends on the training and how frequently they're supposed to be doing that performance. And that really helps us beat the forgetting curve. So Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, everybody's aware of this, is that your learning starts to drop off the more you move away, from that training event. So 6 days after the training event, if you don't refresh that training in any way, you're going to actually see 70% or so loss in training. So why are we even spending that time in training if you don't want to follow up with performance support? That is a question I want to ask you. And it really is about helping that person do their job better, supporting them through that entire learning journey until they become really proficient and it's almost second nature for them to do something. So that is something we need to keep in mind. And the way we do performance support, there's so many different ways to do it. Technology is at our disposal. Again, I would encourage you not to get carried away by the formats. Just try to think of what is the best format for this training objective for that person in their work environment. For example, if it is a salesperson and you're trying to teach them how to pitch people on the phone, maybe even an audio clip or a podcast may be better because that is their learning environment. That is their performance environment. So the more closely you link it to that performance environment, the better your training is going to be, the better the retention is going to be. So that is what I want to leave you with for meeting. Now, so we've covered quite a lot, I think, in the past 40 minutes or so. So we covered the 6 aspects that Daniel Pink highlighted, and we related them to e-learning. Now, this is something I just want to leave on your screen for a bit. So this is the 6 aspects we covered, and within that, these are the different subcategories that we spoke about. You can just apply all of these to your training right now. I mean, there's no limit on that. Just don't go overboard. Just see what you're trying to do. Just always try to tie it back to your business need and see what the ROI is based on that business need. I want to spend a little time going over any questions that you may have.
So thank you very much, guys. And I think we can get down to the questions. Jace is asking, I like the idea of unrestricted learning. What would you do if the learners don't pass the assessment? Do you then have to go and try and fill that in?
I would say if they don't pass the assessment, the feedback that you would give them should tell them where to find that information. Maybe you don't need to specify the exact slide, but at least let them know which module has that information. So then maybe they would be encouraged to go look at that module, take it slowly, and then come back to the assessment and pass that at that point. I would, again, it ties back into your feedback. The better your feedback is, the more encouraged they would be to try that learning out and then come back and answer those questions again.
So let's move on to the question from Erica. Any ideas on how to convince leadership bosses that learners don't need to click on every slide and we don't need to log them down?
Well, you are trying to get them away from the old way of thinking, and that's going to be a little difficult. But then again, I would encourage you to challenge them. What really does clicking every slide mean? I mean, a person can just zone out. I've done that in the past. I've zoned out of safety training. Oh, don't tell my employer, but not this employer. I zone out of safety training. When the slide finishes playing, I just click next. I just go as fast as I can to the assessment, do that well, and I'm out of there. So it's not really the fact that I'm listening to each slide. That's really not going to make the difference. The difference is the amount of learning I'm getting coming into that program with, and the way I do the assessment. So you need to tell your leadership that the assessments are the key here, and the more connected your assessments are with your learning objectives. And again, that's why your learning objectives need to be good, right? The better you make them related to that performance, the more connected you can make your assessments with those. And then, that would give you a justifiable reason for saying, the assessments are robust enough that they're testing on the exact performance, and that should be enough. I think that would be the best way to convince your leadership. But yeah, I would still say it's a question of luck here. I mean, at the end of the day.
Thank you so much, Tarun. And Normand is asking or is saying, we train people who think they don't need the training. It's a recurring training they must do every 36 months.
Okay.
How would you address this situation?
Again, to sort of address the fact that, maybe they think they already know a lot about the training and it's a waste of their time. I think that might be their thinking. I would actually preface the training with a pre-assessment. And depending on how well they did in that pre-assessment, you can serve either the full training or maybe a expedited version. So just by doing that, you're telling them that their time is important, and that if they're able to answer those questions well, then they've just proven that they know the subject matter. So they can just go through the expedited training of 20 minutes versus something that's 60 minutes long. Again, I'm not sure what the compliance requirements around that course is, but this is a way that I would try to do it.
Hope that answers the question. And Sam is asking, for new employees, is it best to tell the story of the job or just the procedure?
Well, wonderful question, Sam. It depends. Like if your HR is already doing that part as integrating them with your team, that emotional connect, then maybe your job would just to be, help them get proficient with the procedures. But if there really is not going to be that connect part of the onboarding, then you have the freedom to do that as part of your e-learning course. So it depends. If it's already happening, don't do it. But if it's not happening elsewhere, I would encourage you to do it within your e-learning as well.
Thank you. And Jeff is asking, many of these ideas are exciting, but would seem to require a lot of development time, which is daunting in a one-person shop. Are there any methods you use to estimate development time?
Well, it's not 100% necessary that it needs to take a lot of development time. You can be smart about it. For example, doing a case or a scenario, you really don't need to make it graphically intensive. If you know that story, you just put it in there and develop it. By using iSpring, you can just publish directly from PowerPoint. So there's quick ways to do things as long as you know what you're trying to do. Yeah, but in general, I do agree. Maybe it would take a little more time just to get our thinking hats on and to create those kind of scenarios. Are there any methods that you use to estimate development time? Well, for us in our company, we usually have sort of benchmark standards. If we know a course is going to have X number of scenarios or Y number of videos, we know the development time for that. It just comes from our experience of doing thousands of projects over the years. But I'm not sure how helpful this is to you, but that's how we do it in our company.
Thank you a lot. And Kyle is asking, how much does the voice in a training affect the earning process? What do e-learners want from the voice of their content?
Okay, I'm going to assume Kyle meant the learning process and not the earning process, because if I had the secret of the earning process, I would go out and earn. But it's learning, I think. And e-learners, I think they would want most of all is connection and a way that e-learning relates to them and their role and them as a person. So for people who are moving away from the classroom mode of training, they really tend to miss that connection with the trainer. So the more steps you're taking to keep that connection in terms of the voice, in terms of the empathy that you're driving through the course, the less they would miss that classroom training aspect. And that's basically what it is. They want to feel that connection, and we need to do as much as we can. Although at the end of the day, it's a computer training course, right? There's limitations, but as much as we can, if we try to do it in the course in terms of voice, empathy, and all those things we spoke about, I think your learners would just find that course that much more easy to take.
Thank you very much. And just a moment. Sandy is asking, have you considered how different generations might find different aspects of instructional design? Do younger users expect something different than
Yes.
someone 50 years old?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the big struggle, right? Unfortunately, our workforces are not chunked out into clean chunks of 40 to 50, 20 to 30. You have a mix of people all from 20 to 60, right? The way you could do that, I mean, the younger generation, and even I might include myself as in the middle of that spectrum, the younger generation really wants to learn quickly. They don't have long attention spans. And the fact is, they're digital natives. So the more you push the learning on their phones, the more you push it towards challenges and questions and things that can be, you can dive into it, do it and get out instead of sitting there for 20, 30 minutes and taking a big course. They would be more open to doing that. And you can actually create different learning formats within the same course. And completing the course in any one format should still trigger completion. That's how we've done it for one of our clients in California, where we did classroom training, we did e-learning, and then one other format. And then they could just choose to complete the training in any format that they like, any learning style that they like. Now, I'm not going to say that we had all 60-year-old people in our classroom. We had a mix, but then this really catered to those individual learners and learning styles. So I think blended learning is the best option for you to do that.
Thank you so much. And you mentioned learning on the phones, and that leads us to the next question from Javier. For
Javier,
your
yep.
experience, are companies switching more to mobile learning? If
Mhm.
so, is it possible to apply what you mentioned today here on a mobile scenario?
It is 100% possible, and I would encourage you to do it. And the answer is yes. More companies are moving to mobile. They're not completely transitioning out of e-learning. They're just adding mobile as part of their whole blended learning strategy. Again, it ties back into the learning style. So if people are more open to learning on the mobile phones, you're just giving them the option to do it. So I would just say it's working out for a lot of people.
All right. So thanks a lot for this wonderful presentation and for covering questions from our audience. And I hope that you guys enjoyed today's session. See you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody.